Well, I asked, where's the beef? Let's call this for what this is. Oh my God! They are so hopelessly woke. How dare you? That is the intellectual capital of the left today. Give me a break. You are now watching the Daily Roundup. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Daily Roundup on this Tuesday, February the 7th, 2023. I'm David Menzies, and my co-host, well, let me tell you a little bit about my co-host. You know, folks, that today is National Fettuccine Alfredo Day, and that's a big problem for her because Nestle has announced it is getting out of the frozen foods business in Canada. In any event, she is the she-devil with a spatula. She is the Khaleesi of BC. She is Drea Humphrey. How you doing there, my friend?
You're a man of so many facts. I'm doing good. I'm feeling good today.
Well, I don't know if it's made the news out west, but it's kind of a big deal. Nestle is saying, and they are done with the frozen foods business in Canada. So things like Delissio Pizza and Lean Cuisine, really big frozen brands. There's going to be a void. I think that void will be filled by other manufacturers, but it's going to take time. But what do you make of that, Drea? Big multinational company like Nestle saying, you know what, there's, I guess, not enough Canadians eating frozen food these days.
Yeah, I don't know what that's all about. I mean, I certainly don't eat it. I haven't even thought of eating frozen meals in a long time, but leaving the whole country seems a little bit much, but I guess we're not paying the bills, so.
Yeah, well, I understand the way Nestle looks at Canada is kind of like a big U.S. state, one state, like Texas or something like that. And I guess it's just not worth the hassle anymore. But you can still buy the coffee and the pet food, and there you go. But before we keep meandering down aisle 5 of the grocery store lane, Drea, thank you so much for filling in for Sheila. She's on a special assignment today. And usually around now, we tell the folks what we're ostensibly trying to do here on the Daily Roundup.
Oh, and that means me. Cue me. That's right. Well, every day we connect with you to give you the daily news, and we chat. We hope you enjoy our commentary. We actually give you an opportunity to join in on the fun as well. So you can do so in a really fun way. You can head to Rumble. We're demonetized in this area on YouTube. So if you head to Rumble, and what's the other one? Is it Odyssey? Getter and yes. Twitter. So those areas you can do, I'm not sure what they're called, but they each have their own chat, and it's a monetized chat. So if you do $5 or more, we try to read your comments. Everybody gets to hear them. We have a discussion about them, and it contributes to supporting our independent journalism. So thank you for keeping Rebel News going.
100%. And Drea, lots on the docket today. I think the one that really caught my eye, well, there's two, but let's start with one. A Quebec minister being surprised, that's the word, that asylum seekers are being given free bus tickets from New York City. How is anything at Roxham Road a surprise now? This has been an ongoing disaster for years. We have gone out to Roxham Road on several occasions, myself included. And it's absolutely incredible. This is what's known as an irregular border crossing. And basically refugees, or in many cases economic migrants, who don't want to get in line and go through into Canada in a proper and legal fashion, they merely waltz across the border. And, there's our CMP there. But believe me, folks, their weapons are holstered. In fact, they turn into the Royal Canadian Mounted Bellhop Service, and they actually help the migrants over. It's in the tens of thousands. And naturally, Drea, they're told, now you come on this date in the future to your refugee hearing. And lo and behold, nobody shows up. And a lot of these migrants are going to major Canadian cities such as Toronto. Mayor Tory's spoken out about this. We don't have the money. We don't have the shelter space that is filling up because of this. It is a farce Drea, because the reason I say this is that if you are a refugee, if you are fleeing tyranny, if you are fleeing genocide, whatever the situation is, once you step into the United States of America, you're home free. And you can't play the, oh, Trump, the boogeyman is coming to get me. It's now Joe Biden, who is completely all about open borders, at least in the southern border of the U.S. and Mexico. So I don't understand. Well, I have a theory. I'll say that later. But in terms of how the refugee process works, once you arrive at the first safe haven country, that's it. You're home free. You've crossed the finish line. Why is this farce, Drea, being allowed to continue at Roxham Road?
I know, you're not fleeing from state to state or from, like you say, the US to Canada. I have my theories on why it's happening. I just wanted to read a little bit more of the article too. It says the New York City Mayor Eric Adams told Fox that his administration helps the reticketing process for people who arrive in the city but want to go elsewhere. So this is exactly what you're talking about. Why is that happening? He says that they want to go to other places, perhaps, including Canada. And, buying the ticket for them to go there, I guess it doesn't go directly there. It goes within 30 minutes of Roxham Road, and then they find their way there, I think is what it says. But I agree, they're not at risk. Yeah. And even if Trump was in power, it's not a good enough excuse. And, Canada pretending that it's so surprised stuff like this is happening, it's just a joke.
Yeah, that is amazing. I wonder if this Quebec minister actually reads the newspapers or wherever she gets her news. But it is an outrage. And I can tell you from our previous reporting, Drea, in Plattsburgh, New York, there's an entire cottage industry, from consultants to taxi cab drivers that drive you right to the so-called irregular border crossing, this I don't see ending anytime soon. And what I think is going on, because this is clearly illegal the way I read the Immigration Act. This is all about Justin Trudeau. First of all, virtue signaling. He did that whole welcome to Canada hashtag tweet back when Trump was the president of the U.S. But more than that, Drea, I think this is Justin Trudeau saying, come on in, come one, come all. We know you're not going to show up at the refugee hearing board. But here's the
matter.
Oh, it doesn't matter. Well, actually, it does matter. Here's what matters. Just remember who let you in.
Yeah.
Right? So every 4 years, when we have an election here in Canada, put the X next to Team Red. That's the quid pro quo here. This is about changing, I think, the demographics of Canada, Drea, to have tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands more people coming in who will be so grateful for the free ride that it results in a vote for the Liberal Party of Canada. What are your thoughts?
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't one of the first steps that Prime Minister Trudeau did when he first got into power was go ahead and sort of shave off the time it takes to become a citizen in order to vote before the next election, if you recall that. So that was kind of a dead giveaway of how things were going to work. It speaks exactly to what you're saying. I suppose it's a good chess move if you really think about it. And you're right, it's just an open door. Come to Canada, you'll be here, but just remember, vote for Trudeau. Yeah. I hope it doesn't actually work anymore, but we'll see.
Yeah, I guess so. Who knows when that next federal election is? It can't come soon enough for me, Drea. But I guess that all depends on, well, not the Prime Minister, but Jagmeet Singh, I would argue. It's kind of perversely ironic. The second last time I went to Roxham Road, I had a rental car that I got at the Montreal airport. And I show up, and I get read the Riot Act by a Mountie at this base, which now looks permanent, by the way, not temporary, that I'm parked in a no stopping zone. And now Drea, just so our audience understands what Roxham Road looks like there, you're quite literally in the middle of nowhere. It's just that there's no cars. There's like kind of, rural properties with, several acres worth of, land. But me being in a no stopping zone on this desolate road. By the way, some vehicles are allowed to stop. Those are the buses, the big coaches that come in to haul away the migrants to a nice, comfy hotel with 3 square meals a day. But I thought, what is wrong with this picture? I know from my tax deductions and my paycheck every 2 weeks, I'm paying my fair share of taxes, and I'm getting reamed out by this RCMP constable for being in a no-stopping zone on literally a dead-end street in the middle of nowhere. Meanwhile, illegal aliens are coming in and having their bags carried for them. Does this make sense to you, Drea?
No, and we saw the double standard happen all through COVID lockdowns as well, with them coming in. Even the testing wasn't the same, the quarantine wasn't the same, and the amount of money we're now learning about that went into that as well is nuts. So we've seen this happening. Everybody just sort of seems to be turning a blind eye to this issue out there in that area who has the ability to do something about this. Yeah. But in that article, it says that they need to look into it, whatever that means. So,
yeah, that means the status quo will remain, I think, until there's regime change in Ottawa, Drea. That's what that means. And speaking of Ottawa, because it is attached at the hip. This was a most interesting story, I thought, Drea. The Canadian Broadcasting Corporation is signaling that it plans to go to full streaming mode, ending traditional TV and radio broadcast. Assuming there is, as we referred to earlier, regime change in Ottawa, whether it's this year, next year, or 2025, Drea, and it is the Pierre Poilievre Conservatives that get in. Is the CBC maybe overthinking its future? Because I know the one promise on the campaign trail that gets Mr. Poilievre the longest and loudest standing ovation is his pledge to defund the CBC. So I'm just wondering, is this the CBC automatically assuming it's going to be more Justin Trudeau Liberal time? And who knows, today can't dream what tomorrow will bring. But what's your take on this announcement?
Yeah, if they want to do it on their terms, or maybe it's not the CBC signaling the plans. Maybe it's the people. Maybe nobody's watching them. Isn't that the case? Hasn't the ratings dropped so much? So it's like, what's the point of continuing to do it? I guess. I think that probably plays a lot into it, is how many people are actually watching them on TV. I'm sure there's been a huge decline as more people start to look for alternative sources. I know we've grown at Rebel News a lot in the last couple of years. So I think that they're just kind of seeing the tide and making some decisions themselves.
Oh, the numbers.
Let's not forget, it's quite timely when you think of C11 as well. If that all goes as planned, they're going to be elevated so much, right? Everybody's going to be seeing the state-backed media. So it makes the most sense.
No, that's a good point. I mean, fiscally speaking, I think the silver lining here, if they if they are indeed defunded or not, is that if they're getting out of the TV and radio business, then you can close all those structures down and sell them and return some money into the taxpayer trough. Oh, imagine that. What a concept. The CBC giving some money as opposed to sucking like a vampire $1 billion, 0.5 a year. And that's the thing, they're so dependent on the taxpayer teat, I think, Drea, that they don't think creatively. And I'll give you an example. I've always spoken about this, and it always pops in mind whenever I'm Front Street, across the street from the Sky Dome, that where Toronto's CBC headquarters is located. Why not, if you own that building, raze it to the ground, build a 80-story office, retail, residential tower, keep the first 7 floors for your needs, and then all the rent that you would get from such a skyscraper, it might even fund you for what you need from the taxpayer. But they don't think outside the box like that at all. They just say, they put out their hands, like Oliver Twist, please, sir, I want more.
Yeah.
And instead of getting admonished, they get more.
Yeah, exactly. It's socialism. They're not the capitalists. No, that's true. On the bottom there. So, but you're right. Oh, you better be careful, or they might be wanting to hire you soon for your ideas.
And oh my God, could you imagine that? We should do a caper like that where I put in my put in a resume for a job at CBC, and normally I think they would deal with an improper candidate by simply putting the application in the garbage pail. I think with me, they would actually rent a flamethrower to take care of my resume. But here's the thing, though, Drea, and I'm not trying to be funny or mean here, but I'm going to ask you this, because CBC still has this idea that they are the thread that holds this country together. Drea, do you watch anything on a regular basis on the CBC?
Well, unfortunately, I have to. I feel like as a journalist, I have to watch them painfully. I do that, but I wouldn't be if I didn't have to know all the information that's happening when I do the story, because as you know, we commit to bringing the people the other side of the story.
Yes.
But in doing that, we always explain what's going on, right? So yes, I do suffer through quite a bit of CBC, unfortunately.
But as you mentioned, that's for work-related purposes.
Yeah. Aside from that, no. And I don't know if you know any other people, like particularly older people. I've been over at their house and I see them playing, CBC or Global, and it's just going over and over. But they're getting angry at the screen, like they don't believe what's being said, and they're like yelling at the reporters. My in-laws are like this. I've seen other people in my family, and I'm like, why are you guys watching it? But they're not the type of people to go online and watch, right? So they're not buying it, but they're still watching it. I'm sure there's a significant portion of those people as well.
Yeah, well, I learned as a child that never yell at the TV. The person on the TV never engages with you whatsoever.
Yeah.
Well, we'll see what happens there. I guess moving on to the CBC sugar daddy, that would be Justin Trudeau, of course. I think we have a video of the meeting, of Justin meeting with all the premiers. I think he's given 2 hours of his time for that meeting. That's all you need, Drea. 120 minutes to fix the healthcare problems of Canada, I suppose. So, an issue, by the way, folks, as long as I can remember, so we're going back to 5 decades, always a healthcare crisis of some nature or another. But I guess Justin Trudeau meeting with the premiers is going to fix this in 2 hours. So let's see what Mr. Blackface McGroper has to say.
So tomorrow, I'll be welcoming all 13 premiers of provinces and territories to Ottawa to talk about healthcare. Canadians are rightly proud of our universal public healthcare system. But if we're being honest with ourselves, recently, it just hasn't been meeting expectations. Now, healthcare delivery is the responsibility of provinces and territories, but the federal government does have an important role to play. We will be stepping up with even more funding to help healthcare across the country, but we're also going to be moving forward on making sure that information and data is being properly used to make sure you get better quality of care and make sure that there are solid outcomes right across the country. Every province or territory has different challenges, which is why we're going to work flexibly with each province to make sure that they're getting what they need, whether it's more family doctors, whether it's less time spent on waiting lists, better support for healthcare professionals as they enter the workforce and stay in the workforce, or even better mental health care. There's lots to do. We're going to have lots of big conversations that'll continue over the coming weeks. You need to know one thing. We're focused on making sure that you get the best quality care for the coming years.
Oh my God, Drea, the needle on my BS detector just went so far into red, it exploded. But by the way, how galling is that when you see Justin Trudeau, this privileged trust fund kid, talk about waiting list. Do you think he has ever been on a waiting list for any medical treatment ever in his life that didn't take, I don't know, 5 seconds? But here's the thing, Drea, right off the bat, Canadians are rightfully proud of our universal healthcare system. Are you proud of it? I'm not proud of it, Drea.
Well, there are so many problems with it. BC, I mean, so many places across Canada, but BC is taking a really hard hit with it. So I wouldn't say proud, no. I mean, obviously there are some good things about it, but proud. He's so out of touch with what Canadians want. That's the issue. So anytime you hear him speaking on behalf of Canadians, he's really speaking on behalf of what he wants Canadians to believe. So,
well, and also, Drea, I think, whenever our public health care system gets discussed, there's two things that happen. Something has to be done right now. It's an emergency. It's a crisis. It's a catastrophe. It's kind of like the same script the climate change people use, right? And then you say, okay, let's think outside the box because the current system isn't working. How about we go to a hybrid system of private and public care, something that is used to great success, I should say, in countries in Europe like Germany and France. And suddenly the left loses their mind. Oh, there's that hidden right-wing agenda to get rid of public health care. But no, Drea, as I've always said, look at the logic of it. If that waiting list Mr. Trudeau referred to, if I'm in that waiting list, say for a knee or a hip replacement, and there is a private clinic, and I have the financial wherewithal to have a private operation, I get out of that waiting list, I get out of that line, I get my procedure done, and meanwhile, who's ever behind me moves up a notch. It's win-win. I don't understand.
That's kind of, sorry.
Go ahead, Drea.
No, I was just going to say, and there's part of healthcare that works like that already. Like when you need certain assessments, I know in mental health, let's say, for autism or something like that, they give you a choice. Do you want to get assessed privately and you fast track it, or if you can't afford it, you're in the waiting queue? And you're right. If more people had that choice, it would help a whole lot of issues there. But what else stands out to me about this is that Trudeau is meeting with all premiers at once about this issue. I don't know if you remember the end of year interview that Rosie Barton did. That was one of the questions that she had. Why are you not meeting with them at once? And he said he would meet individually. And she said something along the lines of, that sounds like you just want to make backdoor deals or something like that. So maybe this is also a result of a little bit of pressure from that interview. I'm not sure, because at the time it didn't seem like he had any interest in meeting with all of the premiers at the same time about this issue. So
yeah, I remember that, and there's a lot of speculation that if anyone's going to do a backdoor deal and break ranks with all the premiers, it's your premier in British Columbia. There's been some speculation about that. But the other thing you mentioned, Drea, this is so important to point out, that let's not kid ourselves. There are indeed grandfathered private clinics working in Canada. For example, not too far away from where I live, in Thornhill, there is a private hospital called the Shouldice Clinic. They specialize in hernias. And lo and behold, I remember about 20 years ago, who goes to the Shouldice Clinic to get his hernia worked upon? Well, that would be Jack Layton, then the head of the NDP. And then he had the audacity, Drea, to pretend he didn't know it was a private clinic. Jack.
Wow.
I know.
Wow.
And it's, Mr. Layton, I'm sorry, but here was your first indicator this was not part of the public system. The issues of National Geographic in the waiting room were less than 10 years old, okay? That should have been the tip-off to you. So the idea that this is the Americanization of the Canadian healthcare system, and by the way, I'm not a fan of American healthcare either. That's why I point to these European models.
Yeah.
It's false. There are private clinics, and there is a double standard. Drea, if there's a Toronto Maple Leaf or a Vancouver Canuck or a Toronto Raptor who gets an injury, do you think they're in a lineup more than 2 hours to get an MRI, an X-ray, et cetera? No, of course not. The system is gamed in terms of those who have money and those who have connections.
Well, I'm still trying to figure out how our recently retired, sorry, my daughter's just giving me my charger. Um, our recently retired premier here, John Horgan, if you recall, he had, I believe, a lump in his throat or what have you. And he got surgery like 3 weeks after finding out. He said, I found out, and he was in surgery 3 weeks. Now, granted, it could have been necessary, but there were so many people waiting for cancer treatment that had been delayed for such a long time due to all of the COVID rules and the short staffing issues from unvaxxed healthcare workers. So I remember that was puzzling. Like, how did he get in so fast? So,
Yeah. Well, like I said, it's who you know in some cases, isn't it? Right.
Yeah.
And but I'm completely open to more privatization. And one other point, I remember speaking to Christina Blizzard. She was a columnist with the Toronto Sun. I think she retired about 8 or 9 years ago. But she covered Queen's Park, and she told me something. This anecdote has always stayed in my mind, Drea, that when it came to OHIP, the Provincial Healthcare Ministry, when you looked at the amount of bureaucrats, it was basically a thin pamphlet. And then by the time she retired, that thin pamphlet expanded into basically a small town telephone book. And what the point is here is that all these billions we shovel into healthcare, don't think it's going to doctors and nurses and equipment and building new hospitals. A lot of it's going to expanding the healthcare bureaucracy. That's the problem. We have so many. I think when we look at Germany, I think I'm going by memory, it's either 8-1 or 11-1. So every bureaucrat that the German healthcare system have in Ontario is either 8 or 11 on our side. Why? These are paper pushers. These are people, Drea, that are spending all day not doing operations, but are sending memos to other healthcare bureaucrats. This has to be reformed.
Absolutely. So much needs to be reformed. And every time anybody says, oh, there needs to be changes with healthcare, the left tends to focus, or the NDP usually, they focus on the US, like that's the only option of changing it. And that's what you mean when you say it. But you're right. You pointed out some of the key issues and the fact that there are other places that we could learn from, really. And it's a matter of life or death. My goodness.
Yeah. And, but again, it's the hypocrisy because it's those on the left that are saying something has to be done now. And you float an idea and they run shrieking, screaming that it's the end of the publicly funded healthcare system until they accept some, bitter medicine, shall we call it, nothing's going to change. So we'll see what happens in this meeting. But I think the idea of the healthcare system being repaired within a 2-hour meeting, the odds of that happening would make the most reckless gambler cringe. Drea, I see we're at the halfway mark, so time for an ad. Keep it here, folks. We'll be right back after this.
I am speaking to you at a moment of grave crisis, when violent and fanatical men are attempting to destroy the unity and the freedom of Canada.
But after weeks of dangerous and unlawful activities, after weeks of people being harassed in their neighborhoods and small businesses forced to close,
as democracy flourishes in Canada,
we don't always agree, and that's okay.
Because individual liberty is cherished in Canada.
Our government will always defend freedom of expression and freedom of peaceful assembly.
It has now been demonstrated to us by a few misguided persons.
After evidence of increased ideologically motivated violent extremism activity across the country,
just how fragile a democratic society can be,
it became clear that local and provincial authorities needed more tools to restore order and keep people safe.
These are matters of the utmost gravity, and I want to tell you what the government is doing to deal with them.
The federal government has invoked the Emergencies Act. the public's legitimate right to know why the government proclaimed an emergency and whether the actions it took were appropriate.
It is our view that there was no justification whatsoever to invoke the Emergencies Act.
It's so tough to watch. There's no reason for that. They were literally running the horses through the crowd.
The police came straight to me and he targeted me and he took his gun of tear gas and he actually shot me directly in my legs.
Was it worth invoking the Emergencies Act, ma'am, to trample on the rights and freedoms of Canadians?
Why do you think excessive honking means that the government should strip citizens away from their rights?
Our next and final witness is Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Order à l'ordre.
Wow, can't wait for that one, Drea, even though there is an overabundance of Trudeau, senior and junior, in that documentary. But it is called Trudeau on Trial. And also, you may have noticed in the background that I think our beloved colleague Sheila Gunn Reid, what does she call her? Oh yeah, the hobgoblin. I speak, of course, of Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland. Mm-hmm. She was in Windsor the other day. And Windsor is directly associated with the auto industry. What do you want to bet this had something to do with electrified vehicles? Why don't we run that video and find out for sure?
Other than obviously highlighting and bringing awareness to company that Windsor's very proud of, what was the purpose of this visit here today? Obviously no real announcements happening today, but what was the reason that you came to Windsor today?
Well, you gave the beginning of the answer in your question. Ricoh is a company that people in Windsor know about and are proud of. I wanted to give you guys a little bit of a boost, a little bit of the spotlight and the cameras and the reporters that comes with me being here. I'm also really glad to support a company that is led by a woman. There aren't that many in this sector, and I do think it's important for women leaders to support each other. So I sort of freely and openly admit that was an extra little asterisk and incentive.
Oh, cringe. Drea, correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't that the most basic of basic questions? Namely, why'd you come here today?
Yeah,
and
she couldn't answer.
Yeah, it looked like she was, sabotaged almost. What do you make of that? This is incredible.
It reminds me of, if you've ever seen like the clips where there's like Miss Universe and they ask, how would you solve world peace or whatever, and they just have no clue and they go off and answer like nothing, and you feel more dumb after listening to it. That's what it was like just watching. It's just so awkward. I don't know what's going on there. I don't want to judge, I don't know if there's a health issue going on there. But her mannerisms also look like someone who's enjoying a really good high sometimes. So I don't know what it's all about.
You know what? You're so right. I mean, this clip must go back at least 10 years ago, but I don't think it was Miss Universe. It might have been Miss America. But I'm pretty sure it was Miss South Carolina that had an inexplicable answer for the ages. Maybe if one of our producers can dig that up, we can watch it again, because that's timeless. And I know what you're speaking of.
I saw one where they couldn't answer. It was something like, why do you think kids in America don't know all the states or something in the country? Is
right.
that the same one?
And you know what? They're so great. Our super producer, Olivia and Efren, they've already found the clip. But here's what I think. I mean, she's taken a page out of the Prime Minister, rolling up the shirt sleeves like she's going to start working on one of those engines. Thankfully, you couldn't tell from that clip, she's wearing blue jeans. And I think that's Chrystia's signal that, yeah, I'm getting down with the blue collar folks, you know. And listen, we here at Rebel are so happy she's wearing blue jeans as opposed to a dress 3 sizes too small. That way we don't have to do the blue dot to disguise any kind of wardrobe malfunction. And no, folks, I do not jest when I speak of that. But yeah, and at the end of the day, I'm sorry, Drea, maybe I'm a male chauvinist, but I'm so beyond the sex of the person running the company. I believe in a meritocracy. I don't care about your sex, your religion, your ethnicity, where you're from, where you grew up. I want you to be successful and running a fantastic national or multinational company, creating jobs for other Canadians. Why is she going on about the fact that it's a woman-run company? Why should we care in this day and age?
Because it's always like insert woke cue right now. Like that's how the Liberals are. Like that's how Trudeau is. They always have to make everything about it. Premier David Evy's very much like that. We've seen it over and over. They want to tie everything that they're talking about with some sort of moral code, so that if you're a good person, you have to agree with what they're saying. I think that's what it is anyways. They're trying to connect on the heartstrings so that you just nod your head.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's virtue signaling, it's wokeism. I bet you Chrystia Freeland and other Liberals are going through their Rolodex. Do we have an openly trans person running a company? We'll do a press conference there.
And it's being said by one of the most powerful women in Canada. Like, you know, like we're this country where women can't succeed, you know?
100%. And by the way, guys, do we have Miss South Carolina impersonating Chrystia Freeland? We do? All right. Check out this. This is what Drea was referring to, folks.
Recent polls have shown a fifth of Americans can't locate the U.S. on a world map. Why do you think this is?
I personally believe that U.S. Americans are unable to do so because some people out there in our nation don't have maps, and I believe that our education, like such as in South Africa and the Iraq, everywhere like such as, and I believe that they should, our education over here in the U.S. should help the U.S. or should help South Africa and should help the Iraq and the Asian countries, so we will be able to build up our future for our children.
Thank you very much.
You know what always kills me?
Up together.
If you play that clip a few seconds longer, there's actually a smattering of applause. What are you people applauding? You know, and by the way, have you ever heard Americans referred to as U.S. Americans? I mean, isn't that kind of redundant?
Oh, it's ridiculous. It looks like we have a chat here.
Oh,
and
all right.
For those of you who just tuned in, if you want to connect with us and help support our independent journalism, you can do so by doing a chat on Rumble, Getter, Odyssey. And so from Billy Howard, he says, C11, re-C11, how do you think CRTC JT will accomplish censoring Rebel and True North, and when? Arrests, web blocking, huge fines? I think just burying us, really, making us inaccessible to people. What do you think?
Yes, Drea. Those are indeed the proverbial, devil in the details, as they say. We don't know how this is going to pan out because really this is uncharted territory. And you know what's amazing, Drea? I remember, I think it was about 20 years ago, it was in the early 2000s, and I remember laughing. It was about the CRTC, and it was issuing a press release saying that they are deciding that they won't be regulating the internet. And, it was so outrageous because especially back then, that was really the Wild West. Like, what else are you not going to regulate, CRTC? The sun rising in the east and setting in the west? I mean, it was so beyond their control. And yet, flash forward 2 decades, just a generation. Yeah. And here we have the Justin Trudeau Liberals basically reimagining the CRTC as their pit bull for censorship online. Something, like I said, 2 decades ago, they said, we can't do this simply because we cannot do this. But they're going to find a way in which to use the CRTC to go after people like us, True North. It's amazing, isn't it? Almost the entire mainstream media, Drea, has been paid off one way or the other. More than $1 billion for the CBC, 'twas ever thus. More than $600 million for all the newspapers. And I know our boss, Ezra, he's likened it to the fact that imagine you had a room with 100 candles and you snuffed out 99 of those candles, but that one candle still burning, and the metaphor being independent media. Well, and that makes it all the more infuriating for this dictator, Justin Trudeau, that there's that one lone contrarian voice. He used the carrot in the last few years. Now he's using the stick. And
were those trick candles? Have you ever seen those where they don't blow out? And I don't think we will blow out either. I mean, he can have all these plans to bury us, but thanks to you guys always come and fight for us when we need your help, and so I'm counting on that.
Yeah,
somehow we will stick together and we will make it happen. Otherwise, Canada is going to be in far more trouble. And part of it makes me think, why? What? Like, I know, yes, he couldn't silence us. We took him to court and won twice when it came to the elections to be able to get in there. But part of me is saying, well, is there something more? Like, what is the plan if they do successfully silence us? Then what do they have in store for Canada after that?
Well, Ezra, being the keen mind that he is, Drea, I know he's always got something up his sleeve. But to Billy's question, how the CRTC and other henchmen of the Trudeau Liberals, how they're going to enact this day and age of being censorious thugs. I don't know what the nitty-gritty details are until it kicks in. It's going to be fascinating to watch, but it's despicable. You know, I can't believe, more and more we're becoming a banana republic, Drea, in terms of free speech and freedom of expression. I know we don't grow bananas. Well, let's call ourselves a maple syrup republic, I guess. But you know what I'm saying. So believe me, we have considerable skin in the game, folks, and we're going to be watching these guys like the proverbial hawk. Do we have any more chats there, Drea?
I don't see any now.
Okay.
But we welcome you to send more.
Why don't we flip over to, you know what? I mentioned the Trudeau Liberals looking for a trans-owned company to do some virtue signaling press conference there. But lo and behold, south of the border, we have Trans Lives Matter activists occupying the rotunda of the Oklahoma Capitol. I don't know if we have a video of this yet, or
there is a video floating around.
I
saw it on Alexa's Twitter.
Okay, then
I'll find it, but
we'll see if we can
find it. I bet
find
you
it.
all of these people still have their social media accounts after occupying, and after occupying the Capitol. But they filled. I think they said around 150 trans rights activists filled it over. Oh, there you go. There's a little bit of footage there. So there they are. They're chanting "Trans Lives Matter" and other things like that. And basically, they are. They're opposing a proposed bill which is seeking to ban the medical transitioning of individuals under the age of 26.
Yeah.
So, which just so happens to coincide with science, because your frontal cortex, which is where you make decisions, that's what you make decisions from, isn't fully developed till 25. So it's a very scientific bill, but it's not looking good. There's a lot of people there, you see. So they say trans lives matter. I agree, all lives matter, but so do the lives of the kids that we're sterilizing and mutilating before they can make those decisions for themselves.
100%. And I mean, Drea, seriously, is there any one real tangible right that trans people don't have that others do? I would argue no. You are free to pretend you're a man or a woman and live out your life that way and get the surgery and get the hormone replacement, etc. What this movement is all about, Drea, is not equal rights, but special rights. And I think of people, biological males pretending to be females and then competing in women's sports and thereby destroying those sports and getting into female penitentiaries. Oh, and what a coincidence, just so happens that most of those males identifying as females, they're in the clink because they've committed acts of sexual assault. Jeez, why would they want to get into a female penitentiary? So when you see this, we want equal rights, nothing could be further from the truth. It's all about extra special rights. And my goodness, it is so nice to see certain politicians, certain states stand up to these lunatics like Oklahoma is and saying, no, we are not going to allow this procedure just for the very reasons that you said, Drea. And Drea, also, I want to get, how funny is this that when it comes to that whole Lives Matter line, I thought that was exclusively reserved for Black Lives Matter. I mean, the left lose their minds when you say something crazy like all lives matter. But here we have them culturally appropriating that phrase, trans lives matter, but they're getting a free pass. Why is that?
Well, if you watched Candace Owens' documentary on Black Lives Matter, you see all the money from the donations went to the trans community anyway. So it's one and the same. I don't know why that happened, but because people, it was effective in that movement. So they're moving it with that, all these labels to divide us and these catchy phrases. And it's always sort of a positive word, right? So it is true that all of these people's lives matter. And so it's a hard thing at face value to contradict. But I think the more that they do this over and over in different groups, different categories, people are just catching on. And unfortunately, what it does is it makes a lot of people just not want to hear anything at all. Like perhaps, let's say there was an area where there wasn't equal rights, which I can't think of when it comes to the trans community. But let's say there was, people are so tired of the, crying wolf that they don't want to hear anything about it at all anymore. And that's the most damning thing about this. And you and I talk about this every week, this issue, because it's not going away. I have a story coming up in Nanaimo, actually. Well, I won't be in Nanaimo, but I'm interviewing the mom who spotted a trans woman, a male-bodied individual with a wig, comes into the Nanaimo Aquatic Center facility and fully clothed, walks straight to the shower, then walks back, goes into a change room beside her daughter, bends down and looks, allegedly bends down and tries to look at the kid. So this mom freaks out, yells, gets him to leave. And the aquatic center basically condemned her for the issue. In the past, if you were a peeping Tom, or even if there were reports that you peeped Tom, you were barred from that facility. So this is another example of it being superior rights, not equal rights, because how is this person who allegedly other parents have complained about still having access to this community? And meanwhile, mom with the 9-year-old daughter is being portrayed as some sort of bigot for bringing this up.
It is despicable, because I would argue, Drea, in that case, if that was one biological woman looking into the stall of another biological woman, that's creepy. You don't do that.
Kick them out too. That would be the equal treatment.
So what's the difference? Well, this is a fake woman. This is a pretend woman. This is a Franken female. Therefore, you have extra special rights. And as you said, instead of thanking the mother for making them aware that a sexual pervert or predator is on the premises, she gets reamed out because this is the trendy woke thing to do, to raise trans people at the top of the human rights ladder. This is this is the ultimate con job. One last thing about what happened in Oklahoma. When I look at that video and those photos, Drea, I can't help but have a flashback to January 6th of 2020.
Exactly, yeah.
Has anyone in the media reported what happened at the Oklahoma Capitol as an insurrection? 150 people uninvited storming into this government building. Oh, no. That kind of insurrection, that's a good insurrection. Nothing to see here, folks. Just a protest for equal rights. Give me a break, Drea.
Yeah, I'm so tired of the hypocrisy. We've got another chat come in.
Excellent.
From Aqueskis 3636, $5 donation. Thank you very much. And they say, I have heard recently Mayor's Covenant, new Vancouver mayor and other cities apparently through WEF to push through green deals. Any thoughts? Thank you to both of you. Well, it certainly doesn't sound surprising at all. I know there's a lot of stuff again happening in Nanaimo in this type of thing that I'm looking into right now. And if you look far in our in the province, we have been working with the WEF for a very long time. I found some old files and I put them up on my Twitter or whatever, but Christy Clark was going and doing things with them. So it wouldn't be surprising at all, but I'll have a closer look. What do you make of it?
You know what? I think, as the saying goes, where there's smoke, there's fire. But sometimes, Drea, where there's smoke, it's just a whole bunch of smoke, no fire. But having said that, I'm not one to disregard that idea. And I base that on a story I did about a week and a half ago where we found out that Dr. Eileen de Villa, Toronto's #1 public health official, with her own money, went to the World Economic Forum to take part in some kind of an equity council. I can't remember the title. I didn't understand it. There's the piece there. I speculated, what is Eileen de Villa doing there to show how to shut down mom and pop restaurants like Adamson Barbecue and have its owner hauled away to jail, while 400 meters down the road, Costco's food service outlet, no problem, business as usual, never shut down for 10 minutes during the pandemic. And our colleague Sheila Gunn-Reid, her speculation, I think there's something to this, the likes of Eileen de Villa, she's outgrown, just telling Torontonians how to run their lives. This is an audition paid for by herself so that she can get a gig with the World Health Organization or the United Nations. She's thinking globally, Drea. That's what might be behind this, because what the hell, if you're a city's top medical health officer, you should be concerned about whether or not the drinking water is good to drink, if restaurants have rodent infestations, etc. I don't say insect infestations anymore because these are the types that want the insects on the menu now. They're not so bad anymore, I suppose. That's my thought on that matter. What do you say, my friend?
Well, it reminds me of when, a team of 5 of us rebels went to Berlin to cover the World Health Organization Summit. And so we were with people like de Villa who had come there, a lot of them on their own dollar. And it was just to smooze and be in, with the in club. And some of our undercover footage showed that they knew that lockdowns were harmful. A lot of the conversations that they had were just like what we've been talking about, but they want to be at the top of where things are going, these medical oligarchs. So yeah, you're right. It's a networking situation, and that's probably why it seemed worth her to spend the money to go out there.
Yeah, and that is the incredible thing, is it not, Drea? The fact that, when you're a career bureaucrat, you don't pay for anything. You just suck at that taxpayer teat until it's an empty husk. And the fact that these bureaucrats would use their own do-re-mi, and hey, Switzerland ain't cheap. and incur all the expenses, you know they have some real skin in the game. That this is an investment. They're not doing this out of the kindness of their heart. They want to move upward mobility, I should think.
Yeah. So we have another chat from AMT60. Thank you very much for your donation. Says, will a VPN help us still find you if this is passed? I follow a few people on Rumble, both US and Canada. Will this prevent opposition leaders from speaking against the Liberals?
You know what? Excellent question, AMT60. I can tell you I know someone, she's looking into that right now. I think her primary goal is to get U.S. Netflix because, well, let's face it, Canadian Netflix sucks. But that might be an avenue, a window. You're talking to somebody who isn't tech savvy, but I'll stay in touch with her and find out how she does.
Yeah, I'm interested to know as well. We have one more chat before we have to head off. I think they need the studio, and I have an interview. This is from Long Meadow. Thank you again. And it says, on the TND show this morning, the New York City mayor is paying for transportation to move illegal migrants from New York City to the North Canada. So we covered this earlier. Can Rebel research if Roxham Road is the drop-off for these illegals? So it is.
It is.
Right?
That's right. Well, for when you're New York City, sending them to Roxham Road, that's simply upstate New York, Plattsburgh,
Exactly,
New York. And you know what, Drea, I'm going to throw this out there to anyone, particularly in Quebec. Maybe it might be a no-hoper, but how about launching litigation? I don't know how you would craft the lawsuit, maybe a violation of sovereign rights, but the idea that there's an elected government in New York City purposefully sending illegal aliens to a irregular border crossing with the only hope of getting them to move to another country. I don't know. Maybe there's something legal there that can be challenged, but I'm not a lawyer. But this makes me furious. It's outrageous.
Yeah, I don't know as well, but only time will tell. Somebody's got to do it.
Well, speaking of time, we got 1 minute to clear out because the big boss man's coming in for an interview in the studio. So I want to thank all our viewers, especially those viewers that gave super chats. As Drea said, that's how we pay the bills. And of course, super producers Olivia